raise your hand? Okay, everyone got one. Okay, awesome. So another important part of being those who are real will keep their packets, okay? So don't lose those. Those are like gold during this retreat. You're gonna need that as we go throughout our days. So please, if, when you go home tonight, make sure you don't lose it. Keep track of it. We're gonna keep using that. Okay. So, who knows? Without looking up here, who knows what the theme of the retreat is? Okay, Ella. Okay, I think you were looking, but good job anyway. Great job, Ella. So the theme of our retreat is fully known and deeply loved. So throughout the course of this retreat, you'll be seeing different speakers. I am the first one tonight, so I get to set the standard real high. And then tomorrow will be Josiah, Pastor Josiah, tomorrow morning and evening. And then on Saturday morning, we get to hear from Mr. Chang. And then Saturday evening, we get to hear from a special speaker who you guys might know. Okay? He goes to this church. It's Pastor Biel. Anyway, so for me and the next 4 messages that you're going to be hearing, they're going to be about being fully known by God. Right? So that theme is a theme of God knows like all of our deepest, darkest things within our heart, all of the brokenness, all of the hardships that we've experienced, all the things that we've done that we don't like to share with people, all the vulnerable things that we might not like to let other people in on. And yet, despite all that stuff, all the dark and even dirty things, God fully loves us. He deeply loves us, each and every single one of us. And so, as we go throughout the retreat, just want you to keep that in mind. That's kind of the theme for each of these sermons. Today's message is on God knows your fears. God knows your fears. And so to start, I have a PowerPoint. Here we go. God knows your fears. I chose a plant one because you should bloom where you're planted. It's not related, but it's just a good thing to know. So, God knows your fears. So the first thing we're going to do is actually, if we go to the next slide, is talk about what are the top fears in America. So we're just going to play a little game here really quick. Think about it for a second. Okay, I got to go grab something. Forgot something. Just think about, what do you think are the top fears in America? All right, just think, and you can chat among yourselves. Okay, you guys had enough time to think, I think. I put 10 of the top fears in America, okay? This was from a survey back in 2014, I believe, of the US population. They did a survey, and they found the top 10 things that Americans are afraid of. If you can name one of the things on the list, it's gonna be on the next slide, you will get a HYM. Okay? Whoa! This is how I get your attention, huh? All right, here we go. Okay, I saw Steven's hand first. So, Steven, what is one of his top fears?
Height.
Huh?
Height.
Height is one. Good job. All right. I'm sorry. Wow, that doesn't fly very well. It's not me, I promise. Okay. Next, height is one of them. Let's go with Tera. Huh? Death was not on the list. What? Okay. Let's go with Joanne. Claustrophobia. Claustrophobia is on the list. Good job. Oh wow, she almost dove for that one. Okay, don't die for these, please. I don't want to see you guys get hurt. Okay, Daniel.
Arachnophobia.
Oh, sorry. Okay, arachnophobia, and then what do you say? Spider. Oh, spider? You guys have the same thought, and you have the same name. That's crazy. That is crazy. I was thinking the same thing too, because my name's Daniel. All right, who's next? Paris? Huh? Needles? Needles was not on the list. I'm sorry. Really close. Here, I'll give you a candy anyway. Cut. She's sixth grade. Okay. We'll go with two more people. Okay. Let's go with. Okay, Livka.
The dark.
Huh? The dark was one of them. Good job. Great job. Okay, last person. Back there, is that Max? That is wrong. That's wrong. I'm gonna let one more person go. Okay. Oh, yeah. People? People's not one of them? But I do talk about people in my sermon, so I'm gonna give you one. There you go. All right, good job. Okay, let's pull up the list. Okay. Oh, needles was one of them. I'm so sorry. Who said needles? I did give it to you anyway. All right. Well, see, I knew. All right. So the first one, above all else, I think you guys knew this already, but public speaking is the top fear. Okay. Number 2 is heights. Quick story. I went skydiving before with my now wife Chang, and the first time we went skydiving, we didn't get to go because it was raining. And when you skydive when it rains, it like pierces you like needles. So we couldn't skydive, but I proposed to Jane. So yeah, I don't know why I shared that. Number 3, bugs, snakes, and other animals. Number 4 is drowning. You guys didn't think of that. 5 is needles. Wait, who said claustrophobia? Oh, you did say it. Okay, I gave it to you, right? Yes, you did. Don't lie to me, Kristen. I know when you lie, I tutor you. Okay, 7 is flying. Okay, flying. 8 is strangers. These kind of get weird at the end, these last 3. 8 is strangers. That's why your parents always said stranger danger. 9 is zombies. And then 10 is darkness. Okay, so these are the top 10 fears of America according to a poll of Americans 2014. All right, so good job, everybody. Proud of you guys for knowing some of these fears. Anybody know, as we transition to the message, anybody know what the most common command in the Bible is? I'll give you a high shoe for this too, actually. What is the most common command in the Bible? Okay, Joyce. What was it? Good job. It is do not be afraid. That's awesome. Bible trivia. So the most common command in the Bible is do not be afraid, or some version of that phrase, right? So whether that's be not afraid, do not fear, etc. Right? And today's topic, today's sermon title is God Knows Your Fears. And it's clear that within the Bible, and you can look at it in, within our own culture, right? The Bible is trying to tell us something, and culture tells us this all the time. All we have to do is turn on the news, and you can see that a lot of the news is controlled by fear, right? That's how they get views. So we can assume 2 things from, what the Bible's most common statement is. First, we will feel fear, anxiety, or worry at some point in our lifetimes. It is a common feeling, right? And the second thing is, God does not want us to live driven by our fears. There's 2 assumptions that we can make from that statement. And God knows what you fear. He knows why you fear. But he doesn't want us to be driven by that. He doesn't want our life to be driven by the fears that we have. But he wants us to be led by love instead, to be compelled by love. Right, this past Sunday, we had a guest speaker, and he talked about fear as well, and he named 2 different kinds of fear. Right? There is one kind that comes from external circumstances. So that kind is good because it can be about self-preservation. Right? So he explained that if there's a car coming towards you or a bus, what is your natural instinct? To move out of the way, right? So that's the good kind of fear because it keeps you alive. But the second kind of fear is an internal fear, that attacks our identity, and it attacks our inner being. And that is the kind of fear that we're going to be talking about today. If we're being honest with ourselves this evening, I think many of us fall into into this default of living by fear, living with fear, and making our decisions based off of fear. Whatever it is, we're typically afraid of something or anxious about something. And what we can see as well from the things that we fear is that these fears point to our deepest idols at times. And so today we're going to look at a passage in the Bible where Jesus talks about fear, and it's in Luke. So you guys, if you guys could open your Bibles to Luke chapter 12, we're going to be looking at verse 4 to 7. If you've made it there, you can look up, so I know you're there. I know you're ready. Okay. Awesome, and it should be up here as well. Thank you, Celine. Okay, so Luke 12, 4 to 7 says this. I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that can do no more. This is Jesus speaking. But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has authority to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Yet not one of them is forgotten by God. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. So, before we get into this and continue to talk about this, I just want to pray for us. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity and this privilege to just speak and to be your mouthpiece in this way. Lord, would you just allow our hearts to be open to what your word has to say about fear and about love? Would we be open to hearing from you? Would your spirit move in this place in order that we might be able to experience and encounter the real and living God who is alive today and working within us and through us and all around us, even in this very moment. So, Lord, would you just use me today? Allow me to just be your vessel in order to speak your words, God. And as we learn more about you, would you just incline our hearts to loving you more and to wanting to know you even just a little bit more. Hey, thank you, God, again for this time, and it's in your name we pray. Amen. So, this is the first point here. It should be on the next slide, but plants. I told you the theme is plants. Fear, God knows your fears, and he knows how they can dictate your life. Right? Fear will dictate how you live your life. The fears and worries that we have can often be irrational, but when we're afraid, we typically have a rational reason why, right? The things that we're afraid of are real things, which is why the important thing is what we do as a result of our fear. So, because the things that we fear, they can be rational, but what we do as a result of it is important. So in this passage, in Luke 12, 4 to 7, what we read here, is Jesus talking to his disciples. Before this, Jesus talks to Pharisees, and what he says to them are these woe to you statements. So he's telling these Pharisees like these bad things that they're doing, like that they have done, right? And now Jesus wants to tell his disciples they're about to go out and proclaim the gospel that Jesus was proclaiming as well. And if you don't know, Pharisees are the people who were the teachers of the law. They knew, like back then, what was the Bible. They knew it super well. They memorized it all, And also, Pharisees were the people who were often jealous of Jesus. They were also people who loved the praise of others. And ultimately, they were also afraid of Jesus, right? Jesus warns us in this passage, right, from the get-go we see here. He warns his disciples not to fear these kinds of men or anyone else who could take their life, because they're not people who should be feared. And these are teachers. They're teachers whose lives are dictated by their fear of people and the praise of men that they desired, and not their fear of God, right, as Jesus' words suggest. And when we look at Jesus' words here, right, what he says to the disciples, I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that can do no more. Those words are as much for the disciples as they are for us today. Because God knows that, I think naturally we fear these types of people, right? You know, they might be leaders, or we just fear people in general. And like a big reason that I want to talk about this topic is because I feel like when I look back at the history of my 26 years on this earth, a lot of the decisions that I've made, a lot of the ways that I decided to live were based on fear, right? I was scared, and the biggest thing, one of my biggest fears has always been people. And that's always had like really big impacts and consequences in my life, right? And it's been said, this guy named Kevin DeYoung, he said, there is no sin more prevalent, so insidious and so deep as the sin of fearing people more than God. Right? And so an example of like how I feared people in my life. Back in middle school, when I was in middle school, skateboarding was like really cool. Does anybody else skateboard? Oh, it's not cool anymore. Okay. Well, skateboarding was like super cool, and because it was super cool, I wanted to like fit in with others. I really wanted others to like me. So I thought to myself, how hard could it be? It's just a piece of wood with 4 wheels taped to it, right? I can ride that thing. I could do some tricks on it. I could do 360 kickflip, ollie, whatever it is. So I decided to convince my mom to buy a skateboard for me. In my head, I had seen like skateboard prices at Walmart, and I was like, oh, it's not bad, it's like $25. So at first I bought a Walmart skateboard for $25. Don't buy a skateboard from Walmart if you're gonna buy a skateboard, okay? They're not very good. So then I threw that one away, I chucked it. And then I convinced my mom to get me a new one because I got good grades. That one ran like $200, right? A lot of money for a skateboard. And it's because I really wanted to like look cool to my friends. So I bought this skateboard, and bear in mind, I had no idea how to ride this thing. I just thought I could do it really easily, and I thought I could look really cool doing it. And so this time came around, I bought a skateboard, rode it like a few times here and there, and then we had a time in middle school where we were supposed to bring in like a few items to show and tell kind of thing. Like, tell me about who you are. Like, what do you like? What are your hobbies? So me being me, I brought a Rubik's Cube. I didn't even know how to solve that, but I brought one. I was like, I'm smart. That's what I want to show people. And then the other thing that I brought was my skateboard. And I thought it was really cool to like carry it around. Because I saw all these really cool kids with long flowy hair carrying around skateboards in school, because you were allowed to carry it while you went to classes. And like if you carried it, like automatically people were like, whoa, yo, like Steven carries a skateboard. Steven's cool. You know, so people thought that immediately. So in my head I was like, okay, can't wait to carry this thing around because everyone's gonna like me. Like I'm just gonna become like the coolest kid in school because I'm carrying around a skateboard. So I remember I went to my first period, brought the skateboard up. My mom dropped me off at school. These kids actually skated to school. I had my mom drop me off with my skateboard. Got through first period, and I was like really excited because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna pass through the hallways with my skateboard in my hand. This is gonna be sick, yo. So I walked out of the classroom with the skateboard, and immediately there was like already some like students lined up outside the hall. You guys do that, right? Like line up outside the hall, waiting for the class to end. So there's some kids there, and this first kid, he was this kid, I still remember his name. I'll keep it hidden. We'll say his name was Mark. That doesn't matter, Jacob. Okay, so Jacob saw me, and he saw my skateboard, and he was like, and I knew he skated. So in my head, when I looked at him, I was like, Jacob, you my dog now, right? Like, we're tight. And then he looked at me and said, poser. He literally looked at me, pointing, he said, poser. I was like, what? Yeah, it was really sad Poser pretty much means like you are a faker. You're somebody who doesn't really skate, but you're trying to pose as a skateboarder, right? And I was like, how did he know that about me? Like, how could he have found that out? And he was like, bro, your board is so clean, you don't even ride that thing. And he was right. There was no scratches on my board. It was completely clean. So, after that, I was really sad. I had to keep my skateboard on me the whole day, but I like kind of did it so that the face wasn't showing. So I was like walking around like this, like making sure no one could see it. But I remember I went home and like I was really affected by the way people were seeing me, because he said that really loudly in the hallways. And I was scared. Man, everyone's gonna see me as a poser. Everyone's gonna see me as like this imposter, right? They're not gonna think that I'm cool. And so what I did when I got home, this is how fear kind of dictated the way that I lived and like showed up in this small way, but it really had some lasting impacts. I decided to go to a curb, and you know like those sewer drain things? Because that part is like a little more lifted than other parts, I was like, if I can make this skateboard look dirty, then I can be accepted. Like people will really like me. So I took the skateboard and I just like, I don't remember how long it was, but I was like, I'm gonna look so cool. So I just started scraping it on the curb. And I gave it a bunch of scratches. Like it was just all messed up. And so the next day I went to school and I was like, okay, now I'm gonna look really cool. And then pretty much the same thing happened. Jacob was like, poser, because like, how could I possibly have torn up my skateboard that much in one day? That makes no sense. In my head, it made a lot of sense. But when I look back on it now, I feel like a lot of that moment was one of those things that triggered this fear of like people, and fear of wanting to be seen in a certain way, wanting to be approved, wanting to be praised by others. And that sin that I read earlier, there's no sin so prevalent, so insidious, and so deep as the sin of fearing people more than God. It might seem like an exaggeration, right? Because there's like so many other things. There's so many other sins that are like so much deeper. But when we take a look at like how the fear of people impacts the way that we live, and the way that we think, and the way that we move, and the way that we speak, we can see that it is really an insidious sin. And even in the Bible, we look at the story of Saul, right? I have to give these away, so I'll give a high cheer for this. Anybody know who Saul was in the Old Testament? Who was he? Okay, Kristen. Old Testament. Old Testament Saul. Yes, Esther. Huh? Yeah, good job, Esther. First king of Israel. All right, good job. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so that's who Saul was. Saul was the first king of Israel, and through his story, we can see how the fear of people, how far it can take us, right? His downfall literally came about because he was scared of people. He feared that his friends would desert him. He feared that they would revolt, and he was afraid that he would become an unpopular king if he followed this command that God gave him. So instead of following God and doing what he knew was right, he decided to disobey God's command for his life because he was fearing his people. And Saul's life, when we look at it, is a good example of what Proverbs 29:25 teaches us, that fear of man will prove to be a snare. Because of this fear of man that he had, he lost everything. He lost the Spirit of God that was anointed on him, and it left him because of this fear that he had of people. So, I know that we're talking a lot about like this fear of people, but I really think that this is important because I think whether we know it or not, a lot of us struggle with this. So I want to kind of give you a little diagnostic here. How do you know if you struggle with fear of people like I do? Well, next slide should show some questions. These for me were some questions that I found online, and as I read through them, they really revealed a lot of my own heart motives and my own fears that I live with. Right? Do you struggle with peer pressure? Do you give in to things against your will just to go along with the crowd? That's the fear of man. Sadly, that doesn't get easier as you get older. Adults, we just find more creative ways to mask it and more socially acceptable ways to channel it. right? We don't do crazy things as much anymore, but we still feel peer pressure when gossip starts or when someone begins to badmouth others. Are you overcommitted? Is it impossible for you to say no? This could be a sign that you love to be loved by other people. And so the fear of people, the praise of man, can control how you live there. Are your relationships more about being loved and seeming lovely than they are actually about loving others? Many times our fear of offending and fear of confronting are less about our great love for the person and more about our desire to feel loved. Right? We have this fear of, man, I don't know if I am loved. And so we act out in that way. Do you have low self-esteem or high self-esteem? Self-esteem issues, though it seems counterintuitive, they're usually rooted in pride. Right? You rely on the opinions of others. You use them to build up your identity and your sense of well-being. You fear how people will perceive you at any given moment. Are you easily crushed by criticism? No one likes to be criticized, but be careful that you aren't putting your identity in other people's opinions. And so that's why criticism devastates you. People-pleasing is oftentimes why many of us can't forgive ourselves. Are you always second-guessing yourself? Worrying about what people think about your decisions? Maybe some of you are just timid, so you second-guess. Or you might hate to disappoint others or to even be thought foolish. And so you're scared of that. Do you tell little white lies? This is something that I realize that I do too. Do you tell little white lies to make yourself look better? It's easy to save face or gain credibility by telling little white lies about how much you pray or what you weigh or when you wake up, where you've been or what you've read. Right? It's easier to just tell these little things in order to boost your self-image to others, to make yourself a little bit better. Just 3 more here. Are you obsessed with your body? Paul says physical training is of some value. It's good to want to take care of your bodies. There's nothing wrong with that. But the fear of man can turn a healthy self-care into an obsession with our shape, our color, and our size. And do you avoid sharing vulnerably because you fear how people might see you differently? Fear of man can often make us miss out on opportunities to love others better by being vulnerable and opening up with our friends, because we don't really want others to know what's going on within us. And if none of these really resonate with you, maybe they missed the mark a little bit, then this last question here. When you compare yourself with other people, does that make you feel good? Perhaps the most dangerous form of the fear of man is the successful fear of man. So some people are confident because they do compare themselves to others and think, man, I am better. But that is more dangerous because it's a life built on the praise of man. And that can be gone within an instant. Right? Pretty much what I'm getting at with these questions is that they can reveal how fear dictates many of our actions, why we do things, and the reason that we live the way that we do. Right? We can see that oftentimes the fear of man and fear in general can dictate how we live. And so the second point, going along with that, a fear-driven life will distort your view of God and cause you to be faithless, self-centered, and it will cause you to idolize comfort. And so first, fear will distort your image of God. Kind of like those trick mirrors. Have you guys ever been to carnivals where the mirrors are all weird shapes? Have you guys been there before? Or, more relatably, Instagram filters or Snapchat filters, right? There's that one that makes your eyes really big and your mouth really big. There's one that I saw that makes you look like The Rock. I like doing that one a lot, it's pretty funny. There's other ones that will make your cheeks look really big and the top of your head look tiny. And so, in the end, you look nothing like yourself. You don't look anything like you really do. And fear can do the same thing to your image of God. It can change how you see God. It can make problems and issues that you're going through seem much worse, and it can make God seem much smaller. So, when we are driven right? By fear in our lives, ultimately, what we're saying is that God is not trustworthy with the things that we are fearful of, right? Fear can also make you believe that God doesn't truly have you in his mind. That's how we can distort that sometimes. Like, God, I'm scared of what college I'm gonna be going into. So I gotta do everything that I can. I'm gonna kill myself to get the grades, to get the SAT scores, and lose everything else in order to just do this because I don't know where I'm gonna end up and I have to go to the best place, right? Fear might tell us that he doesn't care for you or see you as worthy of love. So whatever, that fear it could be the fear of people, the fear of the future, fear of failure, fear of whatever it is. What we're saying ultimately is that God cannot be trusted with our lives. So, in that we have to take action and act on that fear, or we'll remain paralyzed in it, thinking that nothing can change. There's two options there. In my case, there were many times that I didn't believe that God truly loved me deeply. I was scared that how real could God's love be? So I need to go out and find love from other people. Some days, were better than others where I thought, I really did believe and trust in that God loved me and that filled me. But there were other days when it didn't. And there was a part of me that was fearful that I would never find true love. So in college, I would often, Jane will tell you this now. I liked every girl that I saw that passed by. I was like, oh, she's pretty. I'm probably gonna marry her. Another girl walked in my class. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's pretty. I think I'm in love with her. I think I even told Deal about it one time. But there's one moment in particular where this fear of not finding this person, and I gotta do everything I can to act on it, really made me do something kind of silly, kind of crazy. There was a girl in college who was older, and she was really cool. She played sports and stuff, and she seemed super chill and stuff. So I was like, yeah, she's cool. I think I love her. So, so I decided to do anything I could to get face-to-face time with her, one-on-one time. So I remember we were sitting in a bubble tea shop. We were just drinking milk tea with friends, and I made this silly bet that I knew I was gonna lose. There was this magazine that we had open, and I was like, all right, on the next page, if there's a guy with a certain color hair, then I'll do something crazy. I'll turn my hair blonde, right? But if it's not, then you have to turn your hair blonde. I said to that girl. And so this was all just a ruse. I already knew it was on the next page. I knew I was gonna lose. But it was all a ruse just to get one-on-one time with this one girl. So she turned the page, and it was this guy that had the whatever hair, and I was like, oh no, dang it, I lost. This stinks. I guess I gotta go to your place and get my hair dyed, right? I guess so. I guess we're doing that. So I went to her place, and her roommates were there, and they dyed my hair. So I was going for blonde, but if you guys have ever, if you guys have really black hair like me, jet black, you know that you have to bleach it first, right? That's the step. I didn't know that, so we just went with the blonde dye. So we tried to dye my hair, and it was fun because I was talking to this girl this whole time, and I was like, yes, this is great. This is I can't wait to tell our grandchildren about this story, how we dyed our hair and we found love in this place. What an amazing story. So she dyed my hair, and it was covered, and then they uncovered it, and my hair wasn't blonde, it was orange. Tony the Tiger. It looked crazy, and it was super streaky. It looked kind of crazy. I know some of our seniors that have graduated now from hye school, they went on a trip and they dyed one of our teacher, Ryan Lee, his hair, right? And it turned out kind of crazy too. It kind of looked like that. It looked splotchy and really strange, but all of this I did because I was scared, man. I was scared that I would never find the love that I needed. And so I turned my hair orange like Tony the Tiger. It stayed with me, the consequences of that stayed with me for a while. I had to just wait till my hair grew out, and I looked crazy for a long time. At one point, because it just kept growing and I was cutting it and growing and cutting, Like it was like just the tips that were orange. So it looked really weird. But all that to say, trying to go out and live out of my fear in this faithless way ended up with me facing some consequences. I know that's a silly example, but in a lot of ways that can apply to a much bigger picture. Oftentimes, we leave God out of our equation when we're thinking in terms of fear, right? When we look back at this passage in Luke 12, 4-7, and the context in which Jesus is talking, we look at the lives of those who cannot kill the body, right? AKA the people like the Pharisees. They claim to be men of faith, and yet when the Son of Man, Jesus, came to them, they didn't believe in him. Right? And this is what fear can do. It makes you faithless. They began to put their faith in the security of their works. But these Pharisees, they created rules upon rules upon rules in fear of breaking the law of God. But in doing so, what they did is place unnecessary burdens upon those who they were supposed to be leading into a life led by love, into a life of fullness. And instead of leading in love, they instilled fear in people, and not the good kind of fear. This can kind of be similar to like a helicopter parent or like a tiger mom, right? They instill fear instead of teaching their children how to love with healthy boundaries. The second thing here within this point is that fear also tends to make us self-centered. When you are afraid, the person that you are thinking about, when you're afraid, right? When you're fearful, the person that you're typically thinking about is yourself. You're not thinking about others. We see this also in the story of Abraham with Sarai in the beginning in Genesis 12-20. Rarely when we're living out of fear do we genuinely consider the welfare of others. So there, in that story of Abraham and Sarai, they go into Egypt and Abraham is scared. He's fearful that he's going to get killed because his wife is beautiful. So what he does, because he's scared, because he's fearful, he thinks to himself, oh, I've got an idea. I can save myself if I tell these Egyptians that this is not my wife or my sister. Right? That's how I can live. And so he told this to his wife, and she agreed. And so in doing this, in acting out of fear, the Pharaoh of Egypt took Abraham's wife into his palace. Right? And Abraham, in his mind, thought to himself, oh, like, I'm good. Like, I did it. Like, I'm safe now. Because, and the Pharaoh gifted him many things, and he lived in, like, this comfort. But God, in his grace, intervened in that situation and gave Pharaoh a dream. And so Pharaoh gave Abraham back his wife. And in the end, what we could see from that story of Abraham and Sarai is that ultimately, when we live out of fear, it's about us. We seek our own welfare above all else. And it leads to this idolization, or creating an idol out of comfort, because it's all about us. And I think we can often see that in our own lives. If we take a step back and look at the motives with which we really do think, like whatever we're doing. Right? And the last point is this: after we've kind of looked at fear and what fear can do and how God knows these things, the third point is that the way out of a fear-driven life is by changing the object of your fear. So when we look back in the passage of Luke 12, Luke 12, verse 4, I'm just going to start there again. It says this: I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that can do no more. But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has authority to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. So the way out of a fear-driven life, this might seem a little bit like circular, or just a little ironic, is by changing the object of whom you fear. Jesus tells us there that we shouldn't be afraid of man, but tells us that we should be afraid of him who has the authority to throw you into hell. the person he's talking about is God. Only God has the authority to throw you into hell. But he's not saying that you should fear God like we fear people. We shouldn't be afraid of what people think or worry about if we're going to be judged by God constantly. And so, looking at this passage, we can also turn to 1 John 4:18. I just want to give you guys a chance to turn there real quick. So 1 John 4:18. 1 John 4:18 to 19 says this: "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love." 19, "We love because he first loved us." And so when we look at this passage, we see that we don't have to fear the way that we fear people, right? Or see other things. And the main point again is that the way we get out of a fear-driven life, a fear of people, a fear of man, a fear of failure, a fear of not being worthy, fear of whatever it is by changing the object of our fears. And countless times throughout passage we see, in Mark 4:35 to 41, the disciples are out in sea, and the sea is raging, and they're afraid of the storms. But then by the end of that passage, their fear changes from these storms to Jesus, because they see his power and see who he is. And as we look there, we can also see that it's about changing, again, sorry, I keep repeating myself, but it's the object of your fear that really dictates how you're going to live your life. And Jesus goes back to tell us in this passage, right, that God knows even the sparrows that are worth less than 1 penny each, right? Do you guys know that, just to put this in perspective, he knows sparrows that are worth less than 1 penny. You can't even buy a penny with a penny. It costs $1.50. It costs $1.55 to make a penny. So you can't even buy a penny with a penny, but he knows even these sparrows that are worth less than that. And he cares for them. So how much more will God, who cares for sparrows, will he care for you? And when you start to see God not with eyes of fear, but with eyes of love, to see how he really sees you and cares for you and desires you, then these other things that we fear begin to pale in comparison. Right, Jesus commands his disciples at the end of Luke 12:7. He says, "Do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows." I just want to end with this, that God knows the many, many different ways that fear puts us in a place of disobedience against him. And oftentimes fear does that. And fear can cause us to do things that maybe we never thought we would do. And yet Jesus tells us here, do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Jesus isn't just trying to boost your self-esteem by saying, you're worth more. You are so worthy. It's not like the self-help that we hear nowadays. You're worthy of love, but Jesus really believes this to his core. And he knows you as well. Jesus believes it so much that he was willing to show us how much we are worth to him. He showed us how much we are worth by dying on the cross for you and me. At the night of Jesus' crucifixion, he felt deep sorrow to the point of death. It says that in Mark, and I'm sure that in that moment he felt fear and anxiety about what he was going through. What he was about to go through. He had everything to be afraid of in that moment: separation and death from the one who he had been with forever. I know a lot of us here being separated from a close friend or a best friend for even a day after spending a week with them is really hard. But imagine Jesus, who had spent eternity with the Father, being separated from him forever, being separated from him in that moment. Imagine the fear and anxiety that he must have gone through. Despite his fears, right, Jesus took up the cross and became separated from God so that we could be with him forever. Jesus faced a great fear so that we don't have to live under fear any longer. And that's why when we face fear, we can be greatly comforted by the fact that God is with us. And when we truly see him, all our fears can fade away. And again, I just want to reference this verse and tell this last story. In 1 John 4:18-19, there's no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love, and we love because he first loved us. One of the most fearful times of my life was in high school, when I, again, just kind of acting out of fear, I had to turn in a late assignment. It was for a class, and it was an essay. And so I thought to myself, what's the fastest way I can do this essay? And then I stumbled upon Wikipedia. I was like, okay, I'll just copy and paste this. This should be good enough. Right? I didn't think about turnitin.com, but my teacher was using it without us knowing. So I turned in an essay, like really late, close to the deadline, and most of it was plagiarized because it was just straight from Wikipedia. In a family where grades are the highest priority and academic rigor is like the greatest value, plagiarizing was a pretty big deal. So my teacher found out. They put it in that website, turnitin.com. If you guys have been there, you know, like when it turns green, it's like good, because that means it's like your original writing. But when it's red, it's bad, right? Because that's like copied from someone else. So my whole essay was red. Like 100% of it was plagiarized. It was really bad. And me being dumb, I forgot that I did that. So when my principal called me in to the office, I got called from my classroom, and I've never been called from the classroom to the principal's office. So in my head, I was like, whoa, this is awesome. I'm about to get an award. Like, what award am I gonna get here? But he called me in, and he was like, hey, Daniel, sit down. And he looked really somber, so I was like, oh, dang, like, what did I do? So he told me, you plagiarized. And I was like, oh, I forgot about this. I did plagiarize. So he made me sign this statement, long statement, like, this is what I did, this is why I did it, I'm really sorry that I did it. And at that point I was like, dang, like I really messed up, I'm so sorry. But his next words were what really like struck a lot of fear in my heart. He was like, I'm gonna have to call your parents now. I was like, oh, wait, what? Like that actually almost brought tears to my eyes. I've never cried in school before, but I almost cried that day in school. Because I knew what this meant. So he said, okay, like you can go back to class now. I'm gonna notify your parents. We're gonna have to have like a talk about this. So the rest of that day, it was like second period. The rest of that day, my stomach was like turning. I couldn't eat. I was just so scared. I was so fearful. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get punished so bad at home. Like, Maktegi is not gonna do it. Like the wooden stick that my mom uses, that's not gonna be enough. They're gonna go like full out on me. It's gonna be really bad. And it got worse because it got escalated. I had to go to like this school court because I was in an honors program. If any of you go to Olympia, then you know what Apex is. I was in Apex. They have this Apex court where they determine like if you have done something that's wrong, and they determine if you're gonna get kicked out or not. And I was like, oh man. And it got even worse from there. I was like, oh geez, like my parents, like I might not live to see tomorrow. So I was like texting all my friends, like guys, you can have my computer, you can have my mouse, like, whatever it is, you can have it all. I'm probably gonna die tonight. So I remember, that night, going home, still like knots in my stomach. My mom hasn't talked to me at all. She picked me up from school. She didn't say a word to me, and I was like, oh, this is like even worse than if she yelled at me. Because I know it's just like storing up for later. So she didn't say anything, got out of the car, got home, still said nothing to me. She let me eat. That actually made it feel much worse too, because like, why would you just let me eat right now? Like, I'd rather just starve. But she let me eat, and she still didn't say anything to me. I was like, oh my goodness, please. And then she said these words. She said, when your dad comes home later, he'll talk to you. I was like, oh, come on, man. Like, at least with my mom, I had this relationship where, we'd yell at each other every now and then. She'd yell at me, and I could kind of handle it, but it was still scary. But my dad never yelled at us. So when he did yell, it was so much worse because he knew it was something really bad. So my dad didn't come home till like 9 p.m. that night. And so I was just staying in my room. I think I just remember feeling very out of it that entire day till he came home, because I was struck with fear that I was about to be given like the worst punishment of my life. Like, I didn't know what was about to happen. So I was scared, I was shaking, and I hear my dad come in down the driveway. I hear the garage open, I hear the door open, and my heart is like pounding, and my stomach is like turning, and I'm just like, oh no, please, like, Lord, I promise I'll never do this again. Just don't let it be too bad, God, please. So I remember I closed my doors. I think my mom had closed my doors, and I remember hearing him coming down the hall. We had wooden floors, and then I heard the doorknob open, and I was like, all right, this is it. I prepare myself. Like, this is it. I'm actually gonna die. But my dad walked in, and instead of immediately yelling at me, which is what I thought he would do, he had tears in his eyes, and he was just crying. And instead of punishing me with a stick or with like a wooden pole, he just hugged me and he embraced me. And in that moment, it wasn't, my dad, I can't say he's like the perfect father, but in that moment, I felt a grace that I've never felt before. And this verse, 1 John 4:18, but perfect love drives out fear. I think in that moment, it really felt like that. Like, my dad just embraced me and loved me. And it felt like all the fear that I had welled up in me that day was just gone. It was cast down. It was put away. And and in place of that fear was just a lot of love for my dad. A lot of love for, even my family. It extended a little bit out towards my family, and I think this is what it looks like, that when perfect love drives out fear. In Romans 8:1, it says that there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And so the fear of punishment that we may have, the fear of whatever it is that we've done in the past, whatever it is that we are afraid of, God is not saying to you, like, bring down fire and brimstone, saying like, oh, you're a terrible person. Fear me, because I'm going to judge you. But he invites you in with his grace, because he desires to forgive you. He desires to be with you. And he made a way through his son, Jesus Christ, in order that we could be with him forever. So let's pray. Let's close at this time. And as we pray,